Welcome, I'm Geeta Mohan and you're watching World Today. We begin with the massive escalation in tariff war between US and Canada. US President Donald Trump on Tuesday doubled his planned tariff on all steel and aluminium products coming into the United States of America from Canada, bringing the total to 50%. This comes in response to the Canadian province of Ontario placing 25% electricity surcharge on US. Trump said in a post on Truth Social he has instructed his Commerce Secretary to add an additional 25% tariff that will go into effect on Wednesday morning. Now, the US markets, after a red Monday, looked slightly up in early trading, but it soon dipped to red following President Trump's announcement of additional tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminium coming into the US. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell further on opening as soon as President Donald Trump's tariff announcement on Truth Social took place. Yesterday, Wall Street marked its worst day of the year. The S&P 500 plunged 2.7%, the Dow fell 890 points, and the Nasdaq tanked 4%, its worst fall since October 2022. The sell-off was triggered by escalating fears over President Trump's aggressive tariff policies, particularly his refusal to rule out a recession in a weekend interview. Trump brushed off the fears, saying it was a period of transition, a statement which further rattled investors, shifting sentiment from his earlier pro-growth promises. Recession fears intensified, with Goldman Sachs slashing its 2025 growth forecast to 1.7% from earlier 2.4%. Globally, panic spread, with all Asian markets opening gap down. Markets recovered later in trade. And now we're being joined by Shailendra Bhatnagar. He is Chief Analyst and Editor, Markets, Business Today. Shailendra, thank you so much for joining us. Let's begin with what really happened. Now, we're looking at markets in the red. Are the decisions being announced by Donald Trump the reason why we're seeing a global markets in the red, or are there other factors also that one should be looking at?
Good evening, Geeta, and thank you for having me over. I think you've nailed it very well. It's 99% Mr. Trump's efforts to raise this tariff war globally. What we are basically seeing is that the chickens are coming to home and roost. And basically, it's the fears that higher raw material costs, for instance, if they import Canadian steel or Canadian electricity, which will now be costly for US producers, that will jack up prices. And ultimately, whatever expensive raw material is used to make the finished good, that will be expensive for American consumers. Demand might slow. And that's the reason why about 50% respondents in the poll that you mentioned are now fearing a US recession. And the markets are now reflecting that very somber, if I may say, bearish mood.
Well, let's zoom out a little and not just look at US and global markets, but specific to India. We're looking at Indian markets also completely shaken up.
Yes.
Again, is that a result of what's happening in the United States of America, or there is a global trend and there's more that we should be looking at? And how is the Indian administration reacting to these market trends?
Okay, we'll take this in two parts. Essentially, America is the growth engine of the world, and if it slows, typically we also face problems. Not only us, it's across the board, across the world, where you see, shiverings in equity valuations that happen. Now, what has happened today is that there is a sign of maturity in the Indian markets. Yes, they opened gap down, as you were explaining about Wall Street. And from that point onwards, there was, sensible buying taking place. We are already at 8-month lows. We've corrected very sharply on the Nifty, about 16%, about 25% on the mid-cap and the small-cap indices. So quality buying was taking place. And that's the reason why the mid-cap recovered about 1,000 points from intraday low. And of course, the Nifty shut shop in the green. So Indian policymakers are really quiet. We are the 10th largest trading nation with the US. Our time will come a little later. So they are waiting for what happens between Canada and the US and Mexico, and then probably take a call. But we are ready for a deal. Let us see how long it takes.
Okay, wait and watch for now. Shailendra, thank you so much for joining us. But the US president has indeed harped on India's massive tariffs repeatedly since coming to power in January. India says it has not committed to slashing import duties on US products days after President Donald Trump announced that New Delhi indeed had agreed to cut their tariffs way down. Take a look at this report.
India charges us massive tariffs, massive. You can't even sell anything into India. It's almost restrictive. It is restrictive. You know, we do very little business inside. They've agreed, by the way, they want to cut their tariffs way down now because somebody's finally exposing them for what they've done.
This comment from Donald Trump last Friday triggered speculation that India had capitulated in trade talks with the US. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal had just completed his visit to the US, in which he was tasked with finding a solution to or delaying the implementation of the reciprocal tariffs threatened by the Trump administration. The hard line taken by US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick at the India Today conclave on Friday deepened the uncertainty.
President Trump is thinking about it from the term reciprocal. How you treat us is how we would like to treat you. And I would like to tell you that India has some of the highest tariffs in the world, and that will require a rethinking of the relationship, the special relationship between India and the United States.
India has refuted claims by Trump. The Commerce Secretary reportedly updated a parliamentary panel on Monday on the outcome of Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal's visit and talks in the US, stressing that negotiations are still on and no agreement on trade tariffs has been reached so far. According to news agency PTI, the Commerce Secretary told the panel that one cannot go by claims made by the US President. He said India has not committed to anything on trade tariffs, adding that the interest of India would be taken care of during the trade negotiations. The Commerce Secretary also said India was in favor of free trade and that a tariff war would not help anyone, including the US, and could lead to a recession. The panel was also told that India will protect industries crucial to its economy and that developing countries cannot lower their tariffs on everything. Also, in a written reply to the Lok Sabha, the Commerce Ministry said both countries plan to negotiate a mutually beneficial multi-sector bilateral trade agreement and would focus on increasing market access, reducing tariff and non-tariff barriers, and enhancing supply chain integration. Meanwhile, GTRI, a trade relations think tank, has suggested India consider a macro-level reciprocal tariff arrangement covering over 90% of industrial goods under a zero-for-zero approach, where India eliminates tariffs only if the US does the same. It warned against allowing unfettered access to the agriculture and automobile sectors, saying if India conceded today, more products would be added to the US list in the future. Bureau Report, Business Today Television.
The big developing story of the moment is how Balochistan, or the Baloch Liberation Army, continues to hold 100 passengers hostage, now completely repelling Pakistani military's ground assault following the seizure of Jaffar Express. Passenger train Jaffar Express had been on its way from Quetta in Pakistan's southwest Balochistan province to Peshawar in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa when it was fired on. The train, which had been carrying about 400 passengers, was trapped inside a tunnel after the attack. It came under fire and the driver was wounded, police and railway officials said. BLA threatened to kill all 100 hostages if their demands were not met. The separatist group wants all aerial bombardment to be halted immediately. Pakistan Army has rushed a relief train with reinforcements of Pakistani soldiers and doctors from Quetta railway station to Sibi in Balochistan after Jaffar Express was hijacked. Balochistan government has imposed emergency measures to deal with the situation. Listen into the relatives of hostages praying for their loved ones' safety.
We are desperately trying to contact our relatives, but there has been no response since we heard the train was hijacked in Bolan and passengers were taken hostage. My cousin, a woman, and a small child were on board, traveling from Quetta to Multan to pick up a family member. I'm frantic with worry, but no one is telling me what's happening or if they are safe.
Well, this is one of the biggest attacks that Pakistan is facing. The bigger question over here for the Pakistani army and for the civilian dispensation is this a massive security failure on the part of the Pakistani army? What the visuals that we're showing right now is exactly where the area where the hijack took place. There are about 17 tunnels in that entire area, the stretch, and this is around the 8th tunnel where the tracks were blown up to ensure that the train is trapped in that tunnel and therefore easier for the BLA to then take the people hostage. Arzu Kazmi, senior Pakistani journalist, joins me for more on this. Arzu, thank you so much for joining me. The big question first is this a massive security failure on Pakistan Army's part, and who will be held accountable for such a huge attack?
Thank you so much, Geeta, for inviting me. Yes, definitely it's a failure of Pakistan agencies and intelligence that this thing happened in Pakistan today. But definitely Balochistan, as you know, कि Balochistan में बहुत टाइम से ये सब कुछ चल रहा था और everybody knows कि वहाँ पर BLA जो है वो भी अटैक कर रहा है. उसके साथ साथ KP के as you know वो भी एक सेंसिटिव एरिया है पाकिस्तान का. बट अनफॉर्चुनेटली जो पॉलिसीज हैं वो शायद ये लोग ठीक बना नहीं पाए और उसके इसी वजह से हम ये सारे जो अटैक्स देखने में आ रहे हैं वो है. अभी उन्होंने जो लोगों को हॉस्टेज बना के रखा उसमें से 80 लोग जो हैं उनको छोड़ा गया है और वो भी खुद ही BLA ने जो है वो उनको जाने दिया है. लेकिन यहाँ पर हो ये रहा है कि सुबह से तो कोई न्यूज चल रही नहीं थी. टू बी वेरी ऑनेस्ट, हमारे टीवी चैनल्स के ऊपर एज यू नो के थोड़ी देर के लिए ये न्यूज चली, उसके बाद इमरान खान ही हो रहा था. और अभी आई थिंक 4 आवर्स हुए होंगे जब इंडिया टुडे पे शो हुआ है गौरव सावंत साहब के साथ. उसके बाद इन्होंने जो है उस न्यूज को दिखाना शुरू किया. नाउ बिलावल भुट्टो से लेकर मोहसिन नकवी तक एवरीबडी इज टॉकिंग अबाउट बलोचिस्तान और स्टेटमेंट्स दे रहे हैं, अफसोस कर रहे हैं. बट स्टिल आई फील के पाकिस्तान की जो पॉलिसी मेकर्स हैं दे हैव टू थिंक अबाउट इट कि ये क्या पॉलिसीज बना रहे हैं और किस तरह से बलूचिस्तान इशू को हैंडल किया जा रहा है, विच इज वेरी वेरी एम्बैरेसिंग. और डेफिनेटली अगर इनको अपनी कंट्री में होने वाले एक्शंस का या टैक्स का पता नहीं चल रहा तो बाकी चीजों को ये कैसे देखेंगे, चाहे वो KP के हो या कोई भी एरिया. इट इज वेरी वेरी एम्बैरेसिंग फॉर पाकिस्तान राइट नाउ एंड एवरीबडी इज क्रिटिसाइजिंग पाकिस्तान एजेंसीज. लेकिन उनको अपने ऊपर खुद देखना चाहिए बजाय इसके कि लोगों को चुप कराने की कोशिश करें.
Right, Arzu, also the bigger question over here, it also brings to light what the Baloch have been talking about, the struggles against the Pakistani army, and in a way, agar aap dekhein, they have not demanded for anything but Pakistan ground offensive and operations being stopped in Balochistan. That's their demand.
Exactly, Geeta. They want to stop those operations, and of course, they want missing persons का जो issue यहाँ पे चलता चला आ रहा है. They want to work on that. उसके ऊपर कोई भी काम नहीं हो रहा है और इसी वजह से हम देख रहे हैं कि चाहे डॉक्टर मारंग बलोच हो या दूसरे लोग हो बलूचिस्तान के, वो ये प्रोटेस्ट कर रहे हैं. बट अगेन इस वक्त भी जो हमारे मीडिया पे न्यूज आ रही हैं, जो बताया जा रहा है गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से, वो यही है कि दे आर कॉलिंग देम टेररिस्ट और उनको जी हम छोड़ेंगे नहीं, उनको ये कर देंगे वो कर देंगे. तो आई थिंक अगेन आई वांट टू रिपीट माय थिंग कि ये जो पॉलिसीज हैं ये पॉलिसीज ठीक नहीं बना रहे हैं. और इस तरह से अगर आप उनकी डिमांड्स को नहीं सुनेंगे और नहीं कंप्लीट करेंगे, विच इज आई थिंक दे आर राइट एज अ पाकिस्तानी कि वो अपनी डिमांड्स रख सके पाकिस्तान गवर्नमेंट के आगे. बट अनफॉर्चुनेटली यहाँ ऐसा होता हुआ दिखाई नहीं दे रहा. आई डोंट थिंक कि दे आर सीरियस टू हैंडल दीज इश्यूज इन पाकिस्तान, स्पेशली फॉर बलूचिस्तान.
Right. Let's just take our viewers through what has happened. About 100 passengers are still hostage. The demand by the BLA is very clear that the ground offensive and military operations in Balochistan should stop by the Pakistani army. Arzu, any word from Islamabad? We know Rawalpindi must be absolutely rattled, but what's happening in Islamabad?
Of course, in Islamabad, they are started talking about this incident जो आज हुआ है, और अब मीडिया पर भी जो हमारे मिनिस्टर्स हैं वो भी बात कर रहे हैं और बाकी लोग भी, लेकिन again they are giving the same statement कि हम इनके आगे झुकेंगे नहीं, हम इनको छोड़ेंगे नहीं, और ऑपरेशन जो चल रहा है वो चलता रहेगा. एंड दिस इज व्हाट BLA वांट कि ऑपरेशंस को रोका जाए, लेकिन ये अभी भी इसी किस्म की और सेम स्टेटमेंट जो है वो दिया जा रहा है. सो आई डोंट थिंक कि ये चीज इतनी आसानी से हैंडल हो पाएगी.
Right. Okay, Arzu, stay on with us. We're also being joined by Mehran Murray. He's a Baloch activist, and he has been joining us on India Today Global also and having this detailed conversation. If you want to watch that, you can log on to India Today Global. Mehran, thank you so much for joining us here on India Today Network as well. Massive security failure when it comes to the Pakistani army. But what really led to this attack?
I think it's the 75 years of neglect and total ignoring the Balochistan issue, not only by Pakistan, by the world at large, has led to the Baloch come to a conclusion that matters have to be taken in our own hands. United Nations is going to do nothing for us. The international community is going to do nothing for us. We have to stand up for our own rights. We have to fight for what's ours. And that's what's led to today's situation. And I think this was long
Mehran,
time coming.
A hostage crisis never ends well. What happens now? What happens next? How long can they prolong this? Do they have the wherewithal and means to stand up to the Pakistani army?
I would ask the question from the Pakistan army, do they have the means to sustain the occupation of Balochistan? I don't think so. The big brother China probably is going to withdraw their support because 20 years they're feeding the generals with no results. They have not been able to successfully proceed with the CPAC route or any other projects over there. So I think Pakistan has to rethink or re-establish its approach towards Balochistan's occupation.
Okay, any time frame? Are we looking at a time frame over here? This is a hostage crisis. We've seen what happened between Israel and Hamas, and it still continues, the hostage crisis. How long do you think this can last?
I would not compare this to the same as Hamas and Israel because these are not civilians who are taking part in a dance party in the desert where the Israelis were. These are military soldiers and intelligence agency personnel who are butchering Baloch women and children in Quetta, in Balochistan. So it's not, you cannot run a parallel between the two. They are hostages who are military personnel and ISI agents.
Right. Very important messaging over here by the Baloch Liberation Army. It does seem like they have sent out a strong signal to Pakistan, to Islamabad and Rawalpindi, which is the headquarters of the army, on what they want, what they demand. One will have to see how the world reacts to it, particularly how China reacts to it. Mehran Murray, Arzu Kazmi, thank you so much for joining us here on India Today. Shifting focus to another big story over here. Ukrainian and US officials met behind closed doors for hours of talks in Saudi Arabia on Tuesday to find a path towards ending the war with Russia. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio told reporters en route to the talks in Jeddah that the meeting would be important to gauge if Ukraine is willing to make concessions to reach peace. More than 3 hours into the meeting, Mike Waltz, the U.S. National Security Advisor, emerged for a break with Rubio and told reporters, "We're getting there." The talks in Saudi city of Jeddah come after President Donald Trump paused U.S. military aid to Ukraine last week, along with some intelligence sharing, in an attempt to pressure Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to engage in negotiations to end the war against Russia. Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is expected to travel later this week to Moscow, where he could be meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Even while Russia and Ukraine are talking to the U.S. to negotiate peace, the war is witnessing massive escalation. In one of its largest offensives on Russian soil, Kyiv launched over 337 drones targeting Moscow and its surrounding regions. Russia, too, has continued with its drone and ballistic missile attacks on Ukraine, with drone war going on unabated. Can there be peace?
3 people died as a result of a massive Ukrainian drone attack on the Moscow region on Tuesday. It was Ukraine's biggest ever drone attack on Moscow. 18 others were injured, sparking fires, closing all 4 Moscow airports and forcing dozens of flights to be diverted.
There was a strong explosion, I think around 5 in the morning or maybe a bit later. It was very strong. Everyone got up to see what happened. We heard that many more drones were flying to the center, about 6 or 7 of them getting further and further. After that, we saw that a window in our kitchen was broken.
A total of 337 Ukrainian drones were downed over Russia, including 91 over the Moscow region and 126 over the Kursk region.
The noise was terrible. My heart could not calm down for 2 hours. It was terrible.
Russian forces attacked Ukraine with a ballistic missile and 126 drones. A fuel storage was set on fire and at least 2 people were injured.
It turned into a black smoke in the early hours because before it was a very bright fire. We don't sleep at all at night. Odessa was attacked for 5th day in a row. It's horrible. Just look at it.
The war between Ukraine and Russia is far from over, though the US is pushing hard for both countries to come to negotiate a peace deal. Bureau Report, India Today.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's all in this edition of World Today, but if you want to catch our continuous coverage on 2 very important stories, the attack and the hostage crisis in Pakistan, as also the talks between US and Ukraine, log on to India Today Global's YouTube channel. You'll get all that and more. With that, it's goodbye from me. Goodbye and take care.